People are nicely joining, Rayna. We have 6 participants so far.
We have already 7.
Yeah, we can do the countdown between us.
I've invited actually all of our team to join us today because of the interesting topic we're having. The thing is that here in Sofia, it's 4 p.m. So
Yeah.
around the end of the working day.
Yeah, I understand that. But at least
Right.
we'll have the recording.
Yes, fantastic. So I think we can get started. So hi everybody and welcome to this Fireside Chat in our first ever InsightHQ event. InsightHQ was literally born last week. So I'm privileged to have here with us Andrew Beurschgens, the competitive intelligence maestro at Gen, who will uncover for us the enigmatic world of competitive intelligence. Welcome, Andrew. My name is Rayna de Lange. I'm CEO and co-founder of InsightHQ, and this is AMEC Measurement Month. So together with Andrew today, we'll delve deep into the intricacies of the enigmatic world of competitive intelligence. We'll discuss key challenges faced by CI professionals, also the distinct requirements to research and analysis projects. We'll talk about solutions, not only about problems and challenges. For example, we'll talk about how innovative approaches to CI measurement help scope business strategies, successful business strategies in the corporate world, which is extremely volatile and competitive nowadays. And there's no better person to do that than with Andrew. So Andrew is now head of competitive and market intelligence at Gen, the consumer cyber security group, which goes to market through brands like Norton and Avast. And prior to this, Andrew held roles as head of market and competitive intelligence at telecom giant BT and EE. Andrew has also been an active member of CI Fellows since 2016, a chair of SKIP, which is the Strategic Consortium of Intelligence Professionals, and a winner of various awards at SKIP, among which the SKIP Catalyst Award and the SKIP Distinguished Practitioner Award. But most of all, I know Andrew as an expert with out-of-the-box thinking, with innovative approaches to market and competitive intelligence, as someone who's always been dedicated to advancing intelligence-driven strategy and outcomes. Andrew, thanks very much again for being here with me today.
No, thank you very much indeed, Rayna. And with that, such a, I suppose, pleasurable introduction, I feel quite embarrassed by it, to be fair. But you know, thank you, and very honoured to be here with you and our audience today, whether you're from AMEC or more broadly. And just to place some of my history, because it is history, into context. So as you know, people on the call and on the webinar can sort of understand the sort of context of my current employer, Gen Digital, and you know where I have grown up previously, which was part of BT and EE. So Gen, as Rayna alluded to, is a global company targeting 5 billion connected consumers to the internet with cyber safety experiences, and generates about revenue of $3.1 billion. BT and EE before it was a UK-based network provider of fixed broadband, mobile, TV services when I was there, and that was revenue of 24.9 billion. So it's sort of orders of magnitude different. Customer group was slightly different, but they have things in common. So what they do have in common is that they both serve customers with experiences. From BTE's perspective, it was telecoms and entertainment services. And from a Gen perspective, it's the whole protect people's privacy, identity and security while they're online, doing increasingly more things online than they've ever done before. So that's the first thing. We both serve customers. I think the second thing is that those customers have choices. They have choices about where they take those experiences from, and how, you know, the brands I work for at the time continue to work for, you know, deals with those experiences. And so, you know, we're there to serve customers, and, you know, both businesses are there to remain relevant as those customers' needs change over time. And so, you know, we're never too big to fail, regardless of the scale of the two organizations. And yeah, that's the thing that gets me out of bed every morning, the fact that we're not too big to fail. And yeah, the only constant is change.
Indeed, Andrew, customer experiences, this is a huge topic and it deserves an event of its own. I agree with that. But let's start with the foundation. What is market and competitive intelligence? How would you define that? Yeah,
it's a good place to start, Rayna, for sure. So I would describe market and competitive intelligence as a business science. I describe it quite simply as the analysis of all source information that has been ethically and legally collected to create the knowledge and the foreknowledge of the market around us as a prelude, so before decision-making and action can take place. A subset of this business science is made up of 5 Ps, and that's, you know, based on the good work from my fellow peer, Luis Madureira, also Skip Portugal lead, as well as, you know, CI fellow as well. And he broke it down into the 5 Ps. The first one around market and competitive intelligence is having a purpose. So the purpose is to support decision-making, be that around specific goals, gain advantage for the brand or the brands that you work for, and to create an element of early warning. So that's purpose. The second P is around purview. Doesn't really translate particularly well in UK, in English or any other language really. So I think just treat purview as scope. And scope is either at an external level or an internal level. And so an external level, think macro, think change from a political, economic, social, technological, legal and environmental factor. You know, all of those factors influence how consumers behave, and then through that behavior, how they will respond to how you engage with them with regards to the jobs to be done that you're looking to solve for them. So you've got that at a macro level, and then you've also got that external perspective at a micro level. So think about it from a Porter's 5 forces perspective, where you've got competitive intensity in the middle. You've got, you know, the power of customers and the power of suppliers on either side of that competitive intensity. You've got barriers to entry. So new brands, new companies can form and come into the category, which I'm sure we'll discuss a little bit later, as well as the threat from substitutes coming into the category or evolving into the category going forward, as well as that internal dynamic. So scope is very much around external. Is it a macro level? Is it micro level? Or is it internal? The third P is around practices, and that's both from the individual's capabilities, so I suppose, craftware, for want of a better description, as well as the organization's culture to use it as well. As well as, you know, its time focus. So practice around capabilities of individual to deliver, company to consume, as well as, you know, that time focus. And ideally, we'd like it to be about here and now and tomorrow. The fourth P is around process. So it's around the steps to generate recommendations for decision making, stepping through what is described as an intelligence cycle, which is just a flow to define the business problem, you know, plan the research and insight against it, whether that research is coming from secondary sources or primary sources, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. Analyze, create the insights, create the message of the overall, I would say, insight, as well as, the structure and the ability to communicate back. So that's the fourth P, process. And then the fifth P is typically the product. What is it that you get measured on? Typically, it's a briefing pack structured around a problem. It comes up with a set of recommendations and supporting evidence behind those recommendations. So storytelling plays a huge importance here, being able to be quite clear in your thinking, being quite clear in your analysis, and creating a story that flows is critical here. And Barbara Minto's Pyramid Principle, a book that she wrote, she's ex-McKinsey, don't hold that against her, has been a huge help here in terms of, being able to get that, together. So a business science made up of 5 Ps: purpose, purview or scope, practice, process, and then product.
That's really comprehensive indeed. Yes. And how did you get into this field? What appealed to
it's quite a odd journey, I would say. So prior to joining Gen in 2022, when the company was formed, and 1 year before that when I worked at Avast, I'd spent 20 odd years in telco land, whether that's with fixed line services for business customers, consumers, or even the mobile stuff, through wireless. But my interest was piqued, I suppose, back in 1996, which I'm sure for a lot of people on this call is going to be even before some of them are born, right? Even probably before you're born, Rayna. And I joined a company at the time called Global One, which was a company that served multinational business customers around the world with fixed line communication services. So it walked on the earth a bit like dinosaurs, really, because Global One is no longer here. It walked on the earth along with companies like BT's Concert. So there was a joint venture between between BT and MCI in the US, and there was also one in Europe called AT&T Unisource, with Dutch based. And when I joined Global One, we were a new kid on the block. We'd become a joint venture between France Telecom, Deutsche Telekom, and Sprint. And we needed to understand the context in which we were joining, coming into the world at the same time as another US company that was playing the game differently to providing multinational customers with fixed line services, and that company was called WorldCom. And for a lot of people, and a history lesson is that, WorldCom, soon after it started, relaying cables around city centres, business districts and so on, soon went bust, but did create a lot of problems at the time. So that was the background. I suppose what triggered it for me coming into market and competitive intelligence was I joined predominantly as a customer research analyst. And if anybody knows about trying to do research with multinational customers, they're a discrete group, they're time poor, and the research approach is very expensive. And so in a world where budgets are always getting cut, without being able to interview either directly or through third parties, it allowed me to look at being able to understand a different context that was equally as valuable to the organization, which was, outside of customer, but, how are our customers, feeling in the world? What are the forces of change that are impacting them? That means as an organization, do we focus, on this vertical market over and above that vertical market? And what is our narrative associated with, being relevant to solving some of their problems? So very much aligned to, a long time ago, at a time when budgets were cut. And the appeal was very much around, relying on frameworks. And I would say that the business science isn't all about frameworks or analytical techniques. It's predominantly about, simplifying a message to, bring an understanding quickly to an audience ahead of making a decision. So, I like the idea that market and competitive intelligence was relying on frameworks. And, coupled with that was open sources like, working with the sales team, working with public domain insight sources, syndicated subscriptions to address the beyond the customer elements of industry change. That's what threw me into where I am now.
Interesting. So you have such a huge experience within large organizations. So I was wondering, is there a place where a CI function typically sit within corporate structure? A typical department where you would find CI professionals? Could you
it's a good
elaborate
question.
a little bit more on the purpose of CI?
Yeah. The purpose is around decision making, and the purpose, around that decision making, that decision making can take place at a strategic level and operational level, and even at a technological level. And so, based on where organizations, how organizations play and engage with the markets in which they're in today, it's not an easy answer. There isn't a one size fits all. So you might find market and competitive intelligence or insight managers, as is a broader term for things like that now. They might sit in marketing under the broader insight banner. Or with corporate strategy teams, depending on the sort of nature and scope of the work that they're being asked to do. At Gen, I report into an insight director, and we sit within marketing, brand, and communications. However, we serve the entire organization outside of and irrespective of the fact that we sit in marketing, brand, and communications. Some companies, they typically might compete just on technology. And so that capability, the market and competitive intelligence capability might sit within technology, because their scope is very much around, changes in technology, and then, how they bring that to life for their customers going forward. And then even I've known that some, market and competitive intelligence capabilities have sat within finance or commercial areas of the organization. And one example comes to life is the brand BlackBerry. So BlackBerry, for those uninitiated, developed the QWERTY keyboard handsets that unfortunately, are no longer with us in terms of being sold or manufactured anymore. There may be domains of them being used out there, but at BlackBerry, the market and competitive intelligence capability sat within commercial at that time. And so I think the issue isn't so much about where it sits in an organization. I think it's about its purpose, its scope, what is it there to do, and the program's stakeholders continuing to want to engage and find value in your recommendations.
Right. So having in mind that the CI function can have so many different aspects, are there typical key challenges that any CI professional is facing?
Yeah, I think that's a great segue to the issue that we've just discovered, which is the issue isn't so much about where it sits, but what are the challenges outside of location associated with the role. And I think the challenges sort of can play out on two levels. There's one level which is an organizational level, and then there's another level which is an individual level, and the extent to which an individual or group of individuals can influence some of those organizational factors. So running a CI function is a journey, and there are quite a few maturity models out there with respect to understanding where you're starting from, and what does best in class look like, and then what could be some of those actions that you take as an individual or as a team to try and close that gap between where you want to go on that journey and how best to do it. I suppose one of the key challenges is getting across to colleagues internally what you're there to do. What is insight, what is market and competitive intelligence, how does it help me? And so certainly when I arrived at Gen and Avast, I spent a 30-day, a 60-day, a 90-day timetable approach to broadly sort of get out amongst stakeholders to sort of put my value proposition down, and sort of help understand, what are the stay awake issues, what are the key insight questions, key intelligence questions needing to be addressed as part of how we engage in the market, where the market's at, and where it could go. So that's, quite a big challenge, getting the organization to, understand, why you're there and what you do. I suppose, other challenges associated at an individual role is don't work alone. So get to become key part of the core processes, align to the rhythm of the business, be relevant, get to know your colleagues on a more personal level rather than just at a transactional level, who have the mandates to make decisions, integrate and collaborate it. The effort is to be all in. Make it simple, whether that's through the engagement approach, make it visual, make it pain-free in terms of the definition of the problem and the assumptions that are, sat behind what you assume to be the answer to that problem, and simply through your chain of analysis as well. Try and quantify. Some of our work is quite qualitative in nature. Perhaps we'll come on to that later. Some of it can be quantified as well, like competitive intensity and market forecasting and shares and things like that. So yeah, being able to try and quantify the issue or the scale is also quite a challenge. And then, if your mandate is about decision support and what the recommendation is for the here and now, how could that then play through, in the future? So being able to focus on future scenarios in terms of, simpler competitor role plays, or, simpler scenarios. They don't have to be, made up of Encyclopedia Britannica length deliverables. It's about, be brief, be brilliant, be gone, in terms of getting your message across, for sure. So it's about not working alone, making it simple, try and quantify, focus on future scenarios, as well as being able to find the time, create the time to sort of develop some of your softer skills, or your emotional intelligence, to be able to engage with people who are time poor, to engage properly back, I would say.
Yes, that sounds so familiar to me, all of it, because these are the challenges we're facing, to actually really proving the validity of your recommendations to next business actions, to business results, really trying to increase the understanding of and the value of our recommendations, which are data-based and insight-based. This is really fantastic. So you already started answering my next question. It's about the typical research and analysis projects you and your team are running. What types of tools, programs do you have in place? What types of methodologies do you apply? Is it more primary versus secondary research? Is it more online listening studies, news clippings? What type of output do you actually usually have? Quantitative, qualitative? You already started talking about that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I would say there isn't a cookie cutter approach to this, which is I did this here, therefore I'm going to do it there. But you obviously do take things that do work with you. But a lot of what you produce is dependent very much on your defined scope. So as I said before, I undertake an audit to understand what the key intelligence questions are from the different functions who are market facing, about the environment, typically focused around what are our unique capabilities as an organization to serve the customers with the right over the top experiences going forward. And then the focus of that program is both a sort of from my perspective, push to the business, as well as using those push deliverables to help define and create that pull demand as well from the business. Decision makers coming to find you for support on a decision that they have. So the deliverables from a push perspective can be many. I call them drumbeat deliverables. And they can be range from automated news alerts with the commentary about the so what for us. Is this a threat? Is it an opportunity? Is it something that is different to our narrative thus far? So that's one level. It tends to be quite low down. It can be another deliverable can be around compare and contrast the quarterly earnings. If you operate in an industry where the brands that you're competing with, the companies you're competing with, regularly open, as I call it, open their mouths, open their chops associated with the performance that they've had to date, because that's what they are required to do as part of being listed on stock exchanges. Then being able to listen into that quite liberally around what has been what's the story been that they've then shared with the marketplace about things that have helped them and things that have hindered them in terms of their performance. And if they are listed, they have a stock price to try and get up for their stockholders, and with that they sort of outline that some of the assumptions they have about the marketplace. You can infer what drives them, and then you can obviously look at how brokers then factor in what strengths they have, what weaknesses they have, and where they could go next as a result. So you've got that sort of quarterly earnings briefing. Again, it helps get within the rhythm of the organization. And then you might then think, okay, I'll step back from that earnings comparison, and you think, step back on a quarterly basis that basically says, I'll become the conscience of the organization that says, okay, these are the things that I've found out that are happening in the macro level, micro level, that, might impede our ability to continue to grow. And so, that typically outlines where are we, why we're there, what's next, with threats and opportunities to pose to the business. So the sources that consume those types of deliverables then are relative to the narrative. So quarterly earnings, there's a mixture of quantitative numbers, but then there's the story around, the drivers and the inhibitors to that performance. So that's very qualitative. And yeah, the quant and the qual sort of does interlink with each other. The quant underpins the qual a lot of the time. The quant for me is the what, and the qual a lot of the time is the why. And why and the recommendations that you might have as a result is also relatively qualitative as well. So again, no one size fits all. Depends on the nature of what you're trying to achieve, but definitely having that story, that narrative, that analysis, the insight, the message, and the structure, a lot of that is about getting the message across quite quickly.
Brilliant. I absolutely agree with that. So I love the fact that in the context of market and competitive intelligence, we actually see very clearly the link between data, insights, and business outcomes, business results, and next business actions. We've been talking about that the whole time. But besides these obvious benefits for the business, I'm mentioning that also with regards to innovation in research and analysis, because when you have a very clearly defined business goal or a business problem, business case, that brings to me new thinking around designing new methodologies to solve a unique business problem with a unique solution, actually. So there comes my next question. What's the most innovative project you've ever been involved with?
Yeah, there are quite a lot. I suppose there are enough authoritative texts, as in books, out there that help bring to life a lot of the analytical techniques that are used within market and competitive intelligence. So you've sort of got a range of them. And so the things that have, been innovative for me is being able to pick those up, apply them within the organization or organizations in which I've worked at that time, and seen for myself that actually they have delivered on the promise that I was led to believe that they would have. And it's not just a matter of cookie cutter. Again, it's it is about bringing that to life and making it relevant relative to the business context you face, the stakeholders, the culture that you have within the organization, and so on. So I would say 4 spring to mind for me, really. I think one of them was competitor role play that I facilitated when I was at EE at the time, which focused on how will the market react to EE launching 4G services ahead of a wireless auction, spectrum auction, which is what you typically had to do prior to launching 4G, but we had an alternative way. So there was the competitor role play. I suppose the other one was using the social media listening at enterprise scale to gain an early read at speed, Rayna, that allowed us at EE at the time to understand the impact a new entrant was having in the marketplace from launch, and I'll explain why all of these are innovative or were innovative for me at the time. Undertaking win-loss analysis, often talked about but not really done. I have done that a number of times, certainly in a B2B environment where we're looking to understand why certain customer groups, certainly public sector in the UK, were choosing us over and above others, who else they were entertaining as part of that bid process, how well it had gone once they had implemented the solution or hadn't implemented the solution going forward, as well as some new sort of niche product ideas. And I suppose that the last one is a sort of visual technique called Wardley maps. Some of the audience may be familiar with Wardley maps, but basically it's a visual representation of a customer proposition up the vertical axis, broken down into its component parts, and along the horizontal axis you work out of those component parts which bits are pre-standard, which bits are standardized, which bits are emerging as core, and which ones are in decline. And you can start thinking about how things could change just from a simple picture of a proposition and how it's made up, to be able to sort of start thinking about how some of that structure could be undermined going forward through change. And as I started, those 4 things worked for me because they were innovative, because at the time they were high risk and high reward for me. When I mean that, standing in front of competing teams of colleagues, peers, some of whom were very superior to me, with the competitor role play, created an element of jeopardy for me. Was my reputation on the line? Was I going to handsomely mess it up to prevent the outcomes coming that I would have liked? I remember the feedback that we got on the social media insight work, where we created that early read at speed with regards to a new entrant. It allowed the management team to sleep well at night, and I think the French boss at the time described it as super sexy, and he was grateful to be attributed to it. So they were innovative because of the fact of they'd gone well. They were relatively high risk, high reward, and some of them were able to stand up to scrutiny of if you were to put a return on investment on them, what would that look like? And so, I suppose from a market and competitive intelligence perspective, there are different approaches to be able to sort of measure that. One of which is, okay, what is the part of the market that you're looking at that you're aiming to make an impact in could become your, top figure. And then the whole cost associated with, delivering a set of recommendations that either get acted upon or don't get acted upon becomes your denominator. And so, that in effect does either create some big scary percentage points, or, your numerator, a number on the top, could be, the impact that you've had. So whether it's a syndicated subscription that costs so much, and, you've seen as a result of it coming through the relevant forums in which you participate in the organization, being relevant to that audience, and seeing, that message land, that you might have indirectly influenced the actions that come out of that. You sort of got that, we've moved, our revenue pot from here to here over this period of time, and we had all of these costs associated with it underneath, and, it created a percentage calculation. That's sort of one way of doing it. But I think a lot of it is qualitatively. And I remember standing up, within the competitor role play environment, and basically taking that pulse test after quite a intensive half day in a room with about 20 other people, that says, are we better off than when we were at the start? And if the answer comes back as yes, you think happy days. And then would we do it again? And so those two questions, if they get affirmatives for me, do help with regards to not justifying your role in the organization, but proving value at each engagement. And, like most pieces of work, you're only as good as your last piece. So, yeah, I don't tend to sort of rest on laurels particularly at all.
Yes, you're right. In the end, it's about proving the value. What you're saying reminds me of the times when we started working together many years ago. I was really fascinated by the briefs we were receiving from you, because that made us really designing like social modeling studies, predictive analysis, which was pretty rare at the time, trust me. Brilliant. So going back to the nitty-gritty details of competitive intelligence, I was wondering, could you elaborate a little bit more on how you define competitor sets? Do you look at only core competitors, direct competitors, or you go outside of your industry and you look at the so-called disruptors, inspirational competitors?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question, that for sure. So as a marketing competitive intelligence analyst, Rayna, you sort of have to keep your eye on your competitive set, those that you know and the business understands as well. And you can, remember when we had that at a micro level, we had that competitive intensity. We had a micro level substitutes, so being aware that certain brands in your category who aren't core to your competitive set today might be there tomorrow. So it's very much around, there's a core set and then there's a sort of wider group. And, going back to the love and like I have for sort of the analytical frameworks, being able to, boil things down and try and keep it as simple as I possibly can. A competitor radar, framework helped me, certainly when I arrived at Avast and Gen, to be able to sort of plot all manner of companies, given, how fragmented the category could be perceived by others, how many brands are, engaged in providing, cyber safety services, online, and then, understanding a small discrete set of variables, so not making it complicated, but sort of, understanding 3 or 4 dimensions that you would look at each company through to then be able to, plot them on this radar. And those that appeared closer to you, in the core of your competitor radar would obviously be your core competitive set. And then as brands, move further out into that circle approach, then you would more probably call them more peripheral, players as well. So there's definitely, competitor radar framework helps with being able to work out who is the priority to look at with respect to, what they're doing to potentially move business value away from you and to them, or create new ways of solving customer problems. going forward. So as compared to radar, win-loss program, I think is always good. I always use the analogy of sitting, having your hair cut. You don't just sit in the barber's chair as I would do and say, cut my hair. That creates all manner of interpretation around what is the outcome that I want. So I think being able to understand the customer and win-loss allows us to see things that are operating in the shadows through the eyes of the customer, because it's the customer who's going to decide whether they wish to remain with you or whether they wish to adopt another service. So win-loss programs help throw that open. And then there's also the competitive factor, Rayna, that customers will not adopt not only your service but other services in the category, because you use then, say, consumer segmentation to be able to work out that there's an order of rank across a consumer population about who's likely to take your service and who's unlikely to take your service. And I think of our own category here in cyber safety. When everybody appropriately dresses in the day to leave the house or to go to work, you might question that more over COVID, but people don't probably have the same best dressed approach to behaving online to protect their security, privacy, and so on and so forth, because it doesn't matter to them as much as another core group. So you've sort of got that whole customer inertia to certain propositions and S-curves and so on and so forth. So I would say, there's a core competitive set to remain relevant to the organization. But then, once you've got that degree of trust, then there's the opportunity to think about how others could enter into the category and then look for the signals for when they do.
Yes, and I was about to ask you one slightly different question. It's about failures. I'm sure that you've seen in your career a lot of success stories, but I truly believe that most of all we learn through mistakes and through failures. So what are, in your opinion, the notorious market intelligence failures nowadays, like the common mistakes organizations and suppliers do?
It's an interesting question, that, because you might argue that perhaps some of the reasons why companies are no longer here today is the result of an intelligence failure, or the fact that they have become less relevant to their customer group. So when I think about that, I think of Blockbuster. It used to have a brick and mortar approach to ensuring that customers could consume CDs and DVDs of a weekend anytime during the day, and that got subsumed by Netflix. You think of Kodak losing out to smartphone photography, or even Kodak with regards to digital film. You think of BlackBerry, love the company and the brand and the user experience on the device to death, but did it ignore the threat coming from Apple and Android, who played the game differently, that undermined the reason why those organizations are there today. I think you can also, more recently, and it's really quite sad, really, that there are failures of intelligence, perhaps at a governmental level. And I know we're not particularly, focused on government, but there may be some people there, responsible for government intelligence on the call. But you think, there's been a lot of reports about how much Israel had started to, not respect or understand, or were as keenly vigilant about developments in the Gaza Strip and we have what we have. But then I think if you bring it down to the individual level, I think one of the key things for intelligence analysts or insight practitioners is to remain grounded, certainly humble and thick-skinned, and also remain curious. Organizations need to remain open to continue to learn, because while we may be at a juncture in the company's development where we're sipping champagne because customer adoption is high, the party will end, the booze would have been drunk, the Alka-Seltzer needs to be consumed, and it's, what approaches do we have in being able to continue to learn, to leverage data and insights to drive business growth and accountability. There's failure around not framing the problem properly. An ill-defined business problem and evidence as to why it's a business problem could see us go off in different tangents. We might get misstated assumptions and hypotheses to misguide the research and analysis effort. We're looking in the wrong places for the wrong stuff. We're not keeping stakeholders updated and briefed on progress and the new learnings that could then alter. We could be setting expectations more broadly about, oh, everything's possible, but the reality is you need to do this legally and ethically, and there are certain elements that prevent you from doing that. And so I think there are enough hang-ups today that have seen companies come and go. There are enough hang-ups or failures today that sees two organizations presented with the same piece of insight will do different things with it relative to their own culture. And we also recognize that culture eats your strategy for breakfast, right? So what you might have agreed to do as a result of piece of insight and a set of recommendations, you may not get carry through or commitment to do anyway.
Yes, true. But we all witness nowadays that actually relevance, innovation, and disruption play really a critical role. And here comes my next question, very naturally to that, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We can't have a conversation nowadays
No.
without touching upon it. So what impact has advancement in AI have on your daily work and your team's daily work, and what are actually the expectations from senior management on what's possible?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think a lot of the insight discipline, regardless of where you're coming at it from, is it business intelligence, whether it's classic market research, or whether it's part of the business science of insight associated with market and competitive intelligence. I think a lot of the industry is still working out how to use AI within their organization. And so when you then take that through to how's it going to help me? I sort of think AI is going to be a bit like when the internet came to a lot of the organizations. And I grew up in a world where there was dial-up, which there was, and then there was also a time when there was no internet. And so, what the internet did for market and competitive intelligence was, make things a little bit more accessible and available. When you think about, transcripts of, earnings calls, when you think about, the amount of data that's now available and democratized through it, I think AI will become another complementary source and another set of complementary capabilities to help us get to that insight to action as quickly as we possibly can. So I think AI will be a great initial tool for synthesizing the amount of intelligence / data / completed briefs, half completed briefs, fully completed briefs that are available within your organization. So I think use case number one is synthesis of what we have to get to better business problems supported by evidence. And then I think then the whole AI will be about trying to understand its role relative to the intelligence cycle. Will it help with understanding the context in which the business problem is set? Probably not. Does that mean that there's still a role for human-based practitioners? Definitely. Will that help with some of the heavy lifting? Certainly, if there's a more quantitative, longitudinal piece of backward looking and how that might influence the future. Yeah, I definitely think it's there. But I think we'll all go on a journey that broadly says, right, this is what I've previously put into Google to help me understand a foundational level. and then, you know, we've gone to syndicated sources. I think, you know, AI's role will help massively in being able to synthesize that. But I think from a social listening perspective, I think, you know, the value that it can add, you know, to prevent that manual stuff continuing to happen, you know, is probably going to be, you know, quite enlightening with regards to that stuff. So I think complementary, I think synthesis, and I think, yeah, it will only be to the individuals and the business cultures in which they work, culture and attitude to embracing it, to work out where it fits in and, you know, what it allows you to do differently that you weren't able to do is going to be the long runway of it all.
Definitely, yes. And also free up our time to use our brains more efficient way. I would add, I realize this is a huge topic.
Yeah,
and,
it warrants a webinar all on its own, Rayna.
Yeah, of course. But I'd like to encourage now our audience to submit some questions. Please use the Q&A or the chat for it, because I have many more questions to ask you, Andrew, but I'd like to give the floor to our audience too.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it.
Let's see. So we have one question with regards to research suppliers. What would you look for in a research supplier?
Yeah, it's a good question, that. So from a market and competitive intelligence perspective, you can't do it all on your own. So as I said, one of the pitfalls or challenges is not to work in isolation. So you tend to work for partners that give you that extra reach and that extra capability. And so, you know, typically there's a briefing process, and, you know, you look to either do, you know, request for information and get sort of choose a supplier that way. But when I think about it at a qualitative level, you're looking for proof of the ability of that supplier to have done it before. So you're not wanting to buy into the promise of the snake oil that could be there. You like working with the people. You naturally, through the engagement, have an affinity with them. And so you like working with the people. It isn't a them and us perspective. It's we're in this together. It's a joint partnership in the outcome. So if you have got that typically over and in, then, you know, that's really helpful. And then the last one that I always like is openness and honesty, because, you know, for a lot of this, you know, intelligence work, you are creating things potentially for the first time, and you're, you know, calling for a point of view on it. And so, you know, I've been fortunate enough to have worked with suppliers who have, you know, delivered on a proven ability. I've enjoyed and continue to enjoy working with them. It becomes a joint partnership. We've both got skin in the game, and, you know, it's based on openness and honesty. And, you know, any bad messages, let's just get them up and open, you know, from the outset, and work on a common outcome and a common goal.
And what advice would you give to somebody who would want to become a CI expert? Yeah,
I would say, and I wouldn't say this, so I would say I'm not an expert, because every day is a school day, still continuing to learn. And I also recognize that it's not for everybody. There are some, you know, people who are passionate long stayers. There are others who are passing through as part of, you know, broadening their understanding of an industry or type of a business to go on to, I would say, bigger things. I would say, you know, there's some quite, I would say the things that have helped me was being able to stay humble and being open to continued learning. There's definitely a role for organizations like SCIP and other membership organizations, AMEC as well, you know, to network through, you know, through professional membership, through organizations like that. Volunteering. So I've gained a huge amount out of, you know, volunteering, both at the SCIP UK level and the SCIP board level. And yeah, reading is an obvious one. And then, certification does exist, through bodies in market and competitive intelligence, whether that's through the Academy of Competitive Intelligence or, the Institute of Competitive Intelligence for those more European-based colleagues. So yeah, I would say it's not for everybody. Stay humble, open to learning, volunteering, networking, reading generally helps, and then certification for those needing that justification.
Yes, continuous learning, definitely something we just do every single day. And by the way, at AMEC, we share the love for frameworks. We have our great, fantastic integrated evaluation framework. So I'm sure that our colleagues here among the audience will have also other questions, but because we are running out of time, I'd like to thank you very much indeed for your brilliant thoughts and that you shared your fantastic experience with us in the competitive intelligence and market intelligence area. And I'd like to encourage everybody to keep an eye on AMEC Measurement Month calendar. We have fantastic events organized by AMEC members. They're all free events through the whole month of November. And I'll be watching out for events there myself. And I'm really happy we had this conversation today. I hope it was helpful and useful for everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rayna. Thank you very much indeed.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.